In the heart of an ancient forest, untouched by time, lies the ruins of an old village, one erased from history. No maps mark its presence, and no records speak of its people. Yet whispers tell of the forgotten souls who once dwelled there, their essence woven into something far more sinister than mere memory. Daniel Grayson, a historian obsessed with lost civilizations, stumbles upon an old journal in a dusty archive. The pages, yellowed with age, speak of a village that vanished centuries ago, wiped from existence by something unnatural. The author of the journal, a priest named Father Aldrich, warns of a darkness that consumes not just the body, but the very identity of those who enter. Daniel's curiosity compels him to seek the truth, but some secrets are not meant to be uncovered. What he finds lurking beneath the surface of history is beyond comprehension. Daniel arrives at the remote town of Raventon, a place with an air of forgotten tragedy. The locals avoid speaking of the lost village, their expressions darkening when he asks about it. A barkeep at the Hollow Oak Tavern tells him that only one person might have answers, an old woman named Eleanor Harker. Eleanor lives in a dilapidated house on the town's outskirts, surrounded by wilted trees and rusted wind chimes. She is frail but sharp-eyed, watching Daniel with the knowing gaze of someone who has seen too much. When he asks about the village, she warns him that it was not merely abandoned, it was erased. Something unnatural lingers there, something that should remain undisturbed. She gives him cryptic directions and a warning. Once you enter, you are marked. The forest does not forget. Daniel sets out at dawn, his map guiding him through winding paths and overgrown trails. The deeper he ventures into the forest, the quieter the world becomes. Birds cease their songs, and even the rustling of leaves feels muffled. The silence is thick, pressing against his ears like an unseen weight. Then, the whispers begin. At first, they are distant, like echoes carried by the wind. But as he walks, they grow clearer, fragmented voices calling his name, pleading for help. Shadows seem to move at the edges of his vision, but whenever he turns to look, nothing is there. He dismisses it as paranoia, the product of isolation. But in his gut, a deep unease begins to coil. As dusk settles, Daniel sets up camp near the ruins. The skeletal remains of houses stand in eerie silence, their wooden frames rotting, their stone walls covered in strange carvings. Examining the symbols, he realizes they are not decorative, but warnings. Eyes scratched into the wood, crude depictions of figures with hollow faces, their mouths open in silent screams. He takes notes, his fingers trembling. That night, his dreams are filled with distorted figures pressing against him, their skin dry and parchment thin, their hands clawing at his face. He wakes to the sound of movement outside his tent. Stepping out, he finds imprints in the dirt, handprints that lead toward his tent but have no beginning. Something had stood there, watching him as he slept. Daniel spends the next day exploring the ruins. He finds skeletal remains inside a collapsed house, the bones wrapped in remnants of stitched-together skin. A decayed book near the remains reveals a horrifying truth. The villagers engaged in an ancient ritual, one that required the sacrifice of flesh to preserve their existence. But something went wrong. The pages speak of the Stitcher, a being that bound their souls to their preserved skins, trapping them in a state neither living nor dead. A sudden gust of wind carries a voice that whispers directly into his ear. Leave before you are taken. As Daniel prepares to leave, he sees movement among the ruins. At first, he believes it to be a trick of the light, but then he realizes the shadows are moving. Then he sees them. Hollow husks of skin, moving without flesh or bone, their empty eye sockets fixed on him. They are the remnants of the villagers, cursed to linger in their hollow forms. One of them raises a trembling hand, its fingers folding inward like a pleading gesture. Daniel stumbles back, his breath ragged. The husks do not chase him, but they do not need to. The village is alive, and it will not let him leave so easily. Daniel runs into the forest, desperate to escape, but every path he takes loops back to the ruins. He marks trees with his knife, only to find the same marks appearing on trees ahead of him. The realization hits him like a stone. He is trapped. Panic sets in as he recalls Eleanor's words. The village was erased, not just from history, but from reality itself. Once entered, there is no escape. As night falls, a figure emerges from the darkness, a towering presence draped in layers of stitched-together skin. Its face is a shifting mass of flesh, eyes forming and disappearing. It speaks in a voice like tearing fabric, telling Daniel of the villagers' bargain with an ancient force. In exchange for immortality, they preserved their flesh, stitching their souls into their skins. But over time, their bodies decayed, leaving only their empty husks. Now, new flesh is required. Daniel realizes with dawning horror that he is to be the next offering. Daniel's body weakens as the village drains him. He feels his skin tighten, as if it no longer belongs to him. The Stitcher prepares the ritual, chanting in a language older than time. Daniel fights against the pull, his vision darkening. Desperation fuels him as he recalls a passage from the book he found, an incantation buried in Father Aldrich's journal, a name of power. He speaks it aloud, and the world trembles. The spirits of the villagers wail as the curse unravels. The husks collapse, their stolen essence dissipating into the night. The Stitcher screeches, its form convulsing. Daniel sees his chance and runs, his feet barely touching the ground as he bolts into the forest. At dawn, Daniel stumbles into Raventon, gasping for breath. He reaches Eleanor's home, but it is empty, dust coating every surface. Then he sees it. His reflection in the window is blurred, his features indistinct. His skin feels foreign, stretching unnaturally. His voice, when he speaks, is hollow. He realizes the terrible truth. The village let him leave, but only as an echo, a memory. His body walks, but his essence lingers in the stitched remnants of the forgotten. Daniel tries to return to his old life, but people look through him as if he isn't there. He is fading. Soon, even his name will be lost. He will become another whisper in the wind, and the village will wait for the next soul to claim. The end.